do you think happened here?
They raised money for nonprofits on the backs of 18 people who were murdered.
America, 18 people were in the Lewiston mass shooting. The country donated $6.6 million to help their families. Donors were told 100% would go to the victims and survivors, but $1.9 million was secretly diverted to 29 Somalian nonprofits run by people that decided who got the money.
It didn't really hit me until I was in a position with a $93,000 hospital bill that I couldn't cover.
This isn't just about stealing from shooting victims. This is industrial scale public corruption that's now linked to the multi-billion-dollar Somali fraud ring in Minnesota.
Gateway Community Services, again, was paid money by the Department of Health and Human Services to be able to pay us for today. And again, we are not being paid today.
And here's the kicker. A Lewiston City Council member resigned after everything got exposed. Meanwhile, former Gateway employee sits on Maine's Appropriation Committee, overseeing the very Medicaid spending her old boss is accused of stealing. What is up, guys? Tyson DeLaCruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. The Little Mogadishu Store raid is the latest development of what has become an industrial scale investigation into public corruption and the betrayal of the Lewiston mass shooting victims. Let me walk you through the most disgusting part of this story. After the Lewiston mass shooting in October 2023, the Maine Committee Foundation raised $6.6 million from donors across the country who wanted to help families of these 18 people who were murdered. The foundation told everybody, explicitly told donors, that 100% of the money would go to the survivors and the family members. That's what people thought that they were donating to help victims.
Raised money for nonprofits on the backs of 18 people who were murdered, 13 people who were shot. They used that to raise money for nonprofits.
But here's what actually happened. $1.9 million was diverted into, get this, 29 different nonprofits under something called Broad Recovery Fund. And get this, at least 9 of those nonprofits were immigrant focused, and at least 7 were Somalia-linked organizations. So donors thought that they were helping shooting victims, but their money actually went to Somalia nonprofits, some of which are now under investigation for fraud. And the Maine Community Foundation didn't tell anybody about this until a year later, when Amy Sussman, the aunt of a victim, started asking questions.
I called a bunch of them. The first one was permanently closed. And then I went down the list. I only found maybe 3, 4, possibly 5 that were helpful. The rest did not help the survivors and family members.
Out of all the organizations she contacted, maybe 3 to 5 of them actually helped survivors and families. The rest, they took the money and did absolutely nothing for the victims. Meanwhile, Jennifer Zaka, who was shot twice in the Lewiston massacre, received $32,000 from a victim fund. Each nonprofit received $65,000. So the organization got twice as much as a woman who was shot and left with a $93,000 hospital bill. Now let's talk about Gateway Community Services, one of the Somalian nonprofits that's centered around this entire fraud network. Maine's Department of Health and Human Services didn't just find one problem with Gateway. They found a pattern of fraud spanning, get this, nearly a decade across 3 separate audits. Audit cycles 1 and 2 from 2015 to 2018 found $662,000 plus in overpayments to Gateway for services they either didn't provide or weren't eligible to bill for. Audit cycle 3 from 2021 to 2022 found an additional $1.06 million in fraudulent billing, bringing the total to over $1.7 million stolen from Maine's Medicaid program.
We are scrambling. We all have families to take care of.
Friday morning, a handful of furloughed Gateway Community Service employees confronted their workplace looking for answers.
Gateway Community Services, again, was paid money by the Department of Health and Human Services to be able to pay us for today. And again, we are not being paid today.
And here's how this scam worked. Former employees allege Gateway used an electronic monitoring system to falsify staff movements. The system would look like the employees were visiting clients and providing services when they were actually miles away. They were billing Medicaid for services that never happened.
The Department of Health and Human Services has stopped payments to Gateway Community Services. This after a third audit has been released showing overpayments of more than $1 million.
In December 2025, Maine Department of Health and Human Services finally suspended all the payments to Gateway. And when that happened, the employees, many of whom had no idea about the fraud, suddenly weren't getting paid. Over 30 employees were placed on furlough, told to apply for unemployment, and left wondering what the heck happened. And here's what makes this even more corrupt. House Oversight Chairman James Comer has officially linked Gateway to the multi-billion-dollar Somali fraud investigation in Minnesota, the Feeding Our Future scandal where fraudsters stole over $250 million meant to feed hungry children. Hello?
Look at me. Look at me. Come on. I'm the captain now.
What? Speaking of fraud, when we're talking about Somalia Fraud Network stealing $1.7 million from Medicaid and $2 million from shooting victims, we're talking about identity theft and data broker exploitation on a massive scale. These fraud operations don't just steal your money. They steal personal information, your name, your address, your social security number, your medical records, and it's all being sold on the dark web to criminals who use it to commit fraud, just like what we're seeing in Maine. That is why I use Aura, today's video sponsor. Aura protects your privacy by identifying these data brokers, selling your information, and automatically removing them from these sites. Unlike other services, Aura gives you way more features for the exact same price. We're talking about dark web monitoring to alert you if your personal information was found. We're talking about real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking, 24/7 monitoring to keep your identity completely secure, secure VPN, antivirus, and password management. Plus, they have $5 million in identity theft insurance in case something goes wrong. Look, when we're exposing fraud networks that steal millions and millions of dollars from taxpayers and shooting victims, you better believe your personal information is at risk. These criminals are sophisticated, and they're using your data to commit the exact kind of fraud that we're talking about. Try Aura today for 14 days at aura.com/Tyson DeLaCruz. Again, that is aura.com/Tyson DeLaCruz. In those 2 weeks, Aura will get to work, start scrubbing your personal information off these data broker sites. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and you shouldn't either. Now let's talk about the Lewiston City Council member who resigned less than 24 hours after the investigation exposed this connection to victim fraud scandals.
Lewiston City Council member Iman Osman, who is a Somali refugee, is stepping down. News Nation has learned his nonprofit was one of dozens that received some of that money raised for these shooting victims.
Iman Osman, a Somalian refugee who was just sworn in as city council member, ran a nonprofit called the Lewiston Arbor Youth Network that received $65,000 from the shooting victim fund. But when investigators started digging, they found some very interesting details about this nonprofit.
He ran for city council here using an address that is a condemned chicken restaurant. I went there and looked inside earlier. This is his nonprofit received the $65,000 from the Lewiston Victims Fund.
First, Usman ran for city council using the address that is a condemned chicken restaurant, not an active business, not a residential address, a condemned chicken restaurant, a condemned building that you can't legally occupy. Second, Usman is facing felony gun charges. You cannot make this up. So this guy has pending felony charges, runs a nonprofit out of a condemned chicken restaurant building, receives $65,000 from the shooting victim fund, and somehow gets elected to city council. Guys, if you want to get caught up on the full Maine fraud situation, there's a complete playlist. I'll place it somewhere on the link on the screen. Click it, check it out. after you watch this video. And when the media started asking questions, Usman, he resigned immediately. No explanation, no defense, just gone like the wind, because he knew something was coming. On Friday, January 16th, 2026, Lewiston Police and the Department of Agriculture executed a search warrant at Little Mogadishu Store. This raid is part of a $4.5 million fraud investigation that's now connecting all these pieces together.
Warrant in hand, Lewiston Police searching a Somali-owned business on Lisbon Street. We're told the search at the Little Mogadishu Store is part of a lengthy fraud investigation.
Witnesses reported seeing blacked out sedans outside the business as agents entered.
The owner tells me police took the computer where people pay with their credit cards, and she says customers will now have to pay in cash for the time being.
Of course, as damage control, the mayor has to remind everybody that people are innocent until proven guilty. But here's what we know. This raid is part of a lengthier and broader investigation into fraud. And it's happening at the same time as this Gateway investigation, the victim fraud scandal, and the city council member resigning. The Little Mogadishu Store raid is just the latest development in what has become an industrial scale investigation into public corruption and betrayal of the Lewiston mass shooting victims. Now here's where it gets absolutely insane. State Representative DeLaCruz, a Democrat who used to work as an executive assistant director for, get this, Gateway Community Services, now sits on Maine's Appropriation Committee.
That someone who has served on an organization that has committed that kind of fraud, that the Maine people deserve better sitting on the Appropriations Committee.
Think about that. A woman who works for a nonprofit that stole $1.7 million from Medicaid now sits on a committee that oversees Medicaid spending. House Majority Leader Billy Bob Fulkenham and Republican lawmakers are demanding her particular removal, but Democrats obviously are defending her. They say the audits already happened, funds were recouped, and there's accountability. But the House Oversight Chairman James Comer has requested suspicious activity reports from the Treasury Department regarding both Abdul Ali, Gateway's CEO, and DeLaCruz. This is now a federal investigation with national security implications because it's linked to the Minnesota fraud network.
In Minnesota, they're stealing from the taxpayers. In Maine, they're stealing from the taxpayers and victims of a massacre.
America, what we're witnessing in Maine is a complete betrayal of mass shooting victims by a Somalian nonprofit network that's stealing from everyone: Medicaid, victim funds, federal programs, while Democrats obviously protect them. $1.9 million stolen from families of 18 murdered people. $1.7 million stolen from Medicaid across 3 audits. A city council member with a felony gun charge running a nonprofit out of a condemned chicken restaurant. The Little Mogadishu raid is part of a $4.5 million fraud investigation. A former Gateway employee sitting on the committee that oversees the Medicaid spending her old boss stole from. This is an isolated fraud. This, my friends, is industrial scale public corruption linked to the multi-billion-dollar Somali fraud network in Minnesota. The grave robbers thought that they could steal from shooting victims and get away with it. They were wrong. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.